Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel. Today we are continuing our studies concerning lost 10 tribes. We show that lost 10 tribes are now to be found amongst Western nations. And we use proofs from all over the place. We use proofs from the Bible, we use proofs from rabbinical sources, from archaeology, from ethnology, from linguistics, mythology, every field which has something to say about the matter. We have studied it or attempted or endeavoured to study it, and we have shown from every different source how they all converge in the one direction, proving that the lost 10 tribes of Israel are now to be found amongst Western nations. They are brothers to the Jewish people. The Jewish people in the Bible are symbolised, represented by Judah, the figure of Judah, the kingdom of Judah. Those who come out of the kingdom of Judah gave rise to the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. But apart from the kingdom of Judah, there's also the kingdom of Israel. And at the death of King Solomon, the northern section of the Israelite tribes rebelled against the kingdom of Judah. They rebelled against the house of Judah, the ruling descendants of David and Solomon, and they set up their own kingdom. And they comprised the majority of the Israelite nations, and they were taken away by the Assyrians and exiled. And a portion of them reached the British Isles, reached Ireland, Britain, and places on the coast of Western Europe. That is where the lost 10 tribes congregated. And we have shown this, and from various aspects, from various fields of evidence. So today we are going to study a little bit of the Bible, and we're also going to show how the Bible itself gives us indications as to where the lost 10 tribes are, and confirms what we are saying. We're talking now not necessarily so much about the prophetic section of the Bible, which we use extensively and intensively, but we're talking about the historical section of the Bible, because this too is a description of how the lost 10 tribes were exiled and why they were exiled. This too gives us pointers and leads, informational leads, that help us prove where the lost 10 tribes are, that the lost 10 tribes indeed are amongst Western nations. The lost 10 tribes were exiled. They were exiled for their sins, but they were also exiled because it was part of a divine plan. Now, they did sin. They went in the ways of the nations around them. They worshipped other gods. They worshipped idols. They adopted pagan ceremonies and practices, as we shall see. And for this they were punished. They were punished by being exiled, but the exile was also had a positive side to it. It was a part of a divine plan. So you may ask, if it was part of a divine plan, how can it be a punishment? Because the divine plan could have been fulfilled in another way. As if to say, as if divine providence let things run their course. They had sinned, they had to be punished. One of their forms of punishment could be exile, therefore they were exiled. And through their exile, their task in history and in the Bible was to be fulfilled. And what was their task? So it is manifold, but one of its main goals was for the 10 tribes to go down, devolve to the level of the barbaric peoples, to the peoples of the world at that time, to go down to their level, at least to some degree, and then to evolve upwards and bring the rest of the world with them. And that is what they have done, as we have shown in other talks and books of ours, and in lectures and in articles. So now we are concerning ourselves with the actual exile, the actual exile that took place. The exile was prophesied in the Bible and described in the Bible. The prophets spoke of it, especially the prophets Isaiah, Amos, Hosea, and all the other prophets. Amos was born in Judah, but he prophesied mainly concerning the lost 10 tribes before their exile. And Hosea, on the other hand, was born amongst the lost 10 tribes. According to tradition, his father was a prince from the ruling tribe of Reuben. His father was a prince from the tribe of Reuben. And he too dedicates much of his work to the lost 10 tribes of Israel. We have the description of the exiles. The exile took place in stages. So there was one section east of the Jordan. That was the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half Manasseh. There were also tribes in the northern Galilee. And the tribes east of the Jordan, their exile is described in 1 Chronicles 5, verse 26, whereas those in the northern Galilee, the north of Israel, are described in 2 Kings 15:2-9. And then we had, after that, we had, what was left after that was a section around the area of Samaria, where the capital was, and from there too they were exiled, as described in 2 Kings 17, 3-6, also verse 23, also 2 Kings 18, verses 11-12. We just read out a little bit from 2 Kings 17, where it describes the exile of the section around the area of Samaria. North of Judah, it says in 2 Kings 17, beginning from verse 1, in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, the son of Elah, became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned 9 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, only not as the kings of Israel who were before him. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against him, and Hoshea became his servant and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, who had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and had offered no tribute to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. In other words, he had rebelled against him, and he had conspired with the king of Egypt to have some type of combination, an alliance against the king of Assyria, whereas the king of Assyria was, at least nominally, his sovereign, and he was obliged to give him tribute. So it continues from verse 5. Then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land, went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, also pronounced as Hosea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried Israel away into exile to Assyria and settled them in Hala and Habor on the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. Now this exile had taken place because the Israelites had sinned. Some of the offences of the Israelites are listed in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 7-17, and we're going to go through this section and analyse the verses and see what we can learn from them. 2 Kings 17, verse 7, it says, now this came about, this came about, the exile came about, as described, because the sons of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they had feared other gods. In other words, they had worshipped other gods. They had attributed some type of power to other gods, not to the God of Israel. Verse 8, 2 Kings 17, verse 8, it says, they, that is Israelites, had walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the sons of Israel, and the customs of the kings of Israel which they had introduced. And that is to say, they adopted practices of the Canaanite peoples. Of these peoples had been expelled before them, and in addition to that, they invented their own pagan practices or non-Israelite customs, or customs that were not based on the Bible or on biblical values. Continues 2 Kings 17:9, says the sons of Israel did things secretly which are not so against the Lord their God. Moreover, they built themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtower to fortified city. The expression did things secretly in Hebrew is Yehapu from root hapa, meaning to cover over. And the import of this verse, or this expression, is saying that they did a type of synthesis. They took aspects of the worship of the God of Israel and they grafted them together with pagan practices. In other words, they tried to tell God how he should run the world, how he should run creation, how creation should be run, and they did not listen to how he had told them it was. It continues 2 Kings 17:10. They set for themselves sacred pillars and asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. They set for themselves sacred pillars. Nowadays in the West they have maypoles, or they used to have maypoles in English, dancing around the maypole. That was part of this worship of sacred pillars. It's also known in amongst the Franks in Gaul and in other places. So it says that they set for themselves up sacred pillars and asherim, and set themselves up sacred pillars and asherim. Asherim means groves. Groves, that is, groups of trees or plants, which were part of their culture and where they worshipped. And these groves, these groups of trees and bushes, these groves, sacred groves, were a feature of the worship of the Druids in Britain and in Ireland. They also worshipped in groves. This name Asherim means both groves, and it is connected with a goddess named Asherah. Asherah is the name of a goddess who the Canaanites worshipped, and we also find that the Anglo-Saxons, when they came to England, they worshipped a goddess, or one of their pagan idols was a goddess named as Eostra. Eostra is similar to what would have been a Phoenician pronunciation of the name Asherah. Asherah was also known as Astarte, and Eostra is similar to that. The worship of Eostra by the Anglo-Saxons is mentioned by the Venerable Bede. It says in 2 Kings 17, "And there they burnt incense on all the high places, as the nations did which the Lord had carried away to exile before them. And they did evil things, provoking the Lord." High places in Hebrew is bamot. These were in effect elevated ramps, comprised of built of earth or rock, and there they worshipped and offered up sacrifices and had public convocations. It says in 2 Kings 17:12, "They served idols, concerning which the Lord had said to them, 'You shall not do this thing.'" Goes on, verse 13. "The Lord had warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, 'Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you through my servants, the prophets.'" The Israelites did not keep the commandments, but they should have done. The Israelites should keep the commandments. And 2 Kings 17, verse 14, 15, it tells us, "Therefore, however, they did not listen, but stiffened their neck like their fathers, who did not believe in the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes and his covenant, which he made with their fathers, and his warnings, which he warned them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the nations which surrounded them, concerning which the Lord had commanding them not to do like them. They forsook all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made for themselves molten images, even 2 calves, and made an Asherah, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal." Jeroboam, the first king of northern Israel, when they broke away from the house of David, he set up 2 golden calves, one in Dan and one in Bethel, and they worshipped them. The Israelites worshipped them, and that was the beginning of idolatry for them. And so too we find that archaeologists have found in the area of Samaria, they have found bronze bulls. They had a bull cult. And we find when they went into exile that they continued to do this. This Cimbri, also pronounced Cimbri, the Cimbri or Cimbri. The Cimbri were a people who came from Denmark, but they had a Celtic culture. And then they moved to the south and they fought the Romans, and they're quite famous. And they were related to the Anglo-Saxons. And they too, according to accounts, carried a bronze bull around it with them in their travellings, or a bull made out of some type of metal in their travellings. And bronze bulls have been found in Celtic areas, and also in Britain. Also in Britain there are indications that they had a bull cult. They also had a type of religion which was half Israelite, similar to the Hebrews in some ways, similar to that of the Canaanites in others, which is how the lost in tribes had worship before they were exiled. They had priests known as Druids. They worshipped the groves, that is Asherah, as described. And the chief god of the Druids in Britain and in Ireland was known as Bel. Bel is how the Assyrians and the Babylonians pronounce the name Baal. Bel is another name, another form of the name Baal. In other words, they worship Baal, as the Israelites had done before they were exiled, and for which the Israelites were punished by being exiled. It also says in 2 Kings 17:17, "Then they made their sons and their daughters pass through the fire and practiced divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him." So it says here they made their sons and daughters pass through the fire. So we had this as what they were doing. But we had this also amongst the Celts in Britain and in Ireland and other parts of Europe. It's known as Beltane. Beltane in Scottish and Gaelic means Tane, fire or Bel. Bel means Baal. They had special fires made for Baal or in service of Baal, and the practice of Moloch was a process or a custom by which they would take children and pass them through the flames, or jump over the flames, or cause them to pass by through the smoke of fires, or jump over the fires, or sometimes they would sacrifice them into the flames themselves, offer up human sacrifice. It was all connected with fires and passing through the fires, over the fires, or into the fires. This was known as Moloch, and Moloch was associated with Baal, and this same custom that the Israelites had, we find the very same custom amongst the British and the Irish inhabitants of the British Isles in the time of the Celtic era. Consequently, they were exiled, as we are here, 2 Kings 17:18. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them from his sight. No one was left except the tribe of Judah. So this is it. We see a very brief description of their type of pagan worship, of what they did, and we find these very same practices to have been carried on in the West, in Britain and Ireland and elsewhere in the West. And we know from other sources that is where the Lost tribe settled, but the continuation of these same practices, finding them there in these areas, and as far as I know, not anywhere else, also itself, it's a proof. It might not be an attractive proof. It might not be the kind of evidence that we would be proud of being associated with, but it's there, it's evidence. And it's worth noting, because it too has significance. In the end times, the lost 10 tribes will repent, they will return to God Almighty, and they will once again be accepted and acknowledged as the children of Israel. Hosea chapter 2 verse 16 says, "It will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi, that is my husband, and will no longer call me Baali, that is my master." Notice the word Baal, Baali, my Baal. And this expression, no longer call me Baali, indicates that they did worship God to a certain degree, but they confused him with Baal. They gave him the name Baal. In some cases, they might have intended the God of Israel, but they gave him the name Baal, because Baal in Hebrew can mean master. It also was the name of a specific deity, so there was ground for confusion here. This is what Hosea is indicating, and also we find this in other researchers, such indications of such having been the case. He continues, Hosea 2 verse 17, "For I will remove the name of the Baals," and once again the Baals, "from my mouth, so that they will be mentioned by their names no more. And that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky, and the creeping things of the ground. And I will abolish the bow, the sword, and war from the land. And I will make them lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. Yea, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion. And I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord." Thank you. May the Lord God of Israel bless you.